Welcome to the deep dive, where we take a deep dive into a specific topic, and
Yeah.
it just so happens to be Christmas Eve. So if you're listening while trimming the tree or wrapping those last-minute gifts, well, consider this a little intellectual stocking stucker from us.
Right.
I'm Hari, and as always, I'm joined by our expert, ready to unpack some fascinating history.
Happy holidays to you all. I'm Kimi, and today we're traveling back in time to another Christmas Eve.
Oh wow!
December 24th, 1964 to be precise,
Yeah.
for a look at the Brinks Hotel bombing in Saigon during the Vietnam War.
This wasn't just a random act of violence or a tragic accident.
Right.
This was a meticulously planned operation by the Vietcong, sending shockwaves through Saigon and having ripple effects that extended far beyond Vietnam.
Absolutely. To fully grasp the significance of this bombing, we need to understand the historical context of the Vietnam War, a conflict deeply intertwined with Cold War tensions.
So let's rewind a bit and set the stage for our listeners, taking them back to the early 1960s.
All right. The year is 1964. The Cold War is at its peak, and the world is divided between the communist bloc and the Western powers.
Right.
And Vietnam found itself right in the middle of this ideological battleground.
The country was divided.
Yeah.
Communist North Vietnam was fighting to reunify the country under its rule.
Right.
While South Vietnam, backed by the United States, was trying desperately to resist.
And the U.S. involvement in Vietnam at this point was steadily escalating.
Mhm.
It was a pivotal year, with America increasing its military aid and sending more advisors to support the South Vietnamese government and its army, the ARVN,
Okay.
or Army of the Republic of Vietnam.
And into this already volatile mix comes the Brinks Hotel bombing, a stark reminder of the stakes and the risks involved in this increasingly complex conflict.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the Brinks Hotel wasn't just any building.
Right.
It was much more than bricks and mortar, serving as a bachelor officers' quarters, a social hub for U.S. Army officers stationed in Vietnam.
So while it served as a residence,
Mhm.
it was also a place where officers could relax, socialize, and enjoy some comforts of home with a rooftop bar, a decent restaurant,
Oh, wow.
and even movie screenings.
Imagine it, Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
a time when thoughts turn to family and festivities.
Right.
And here's this hotel, a symbol of American presence in Vietnam,
Yeah.
with a rooftop bar likely bustling with officers enjoying some camaraderie and holiday cheer.
And the Viet Cong chose this particular time, this specific location, to carry out their attack, which adds another layer of complexity and chilling calculation to their actions.
It speaks to the meticulous planning and strategic thinking behind the operation.
Right.
They weren't just trying to inflict casualties, they were aiming to deliver a message,
Yeah.
to strike at the heart of the American presence in Saigon.
And they went to extraordinary lengths to ensure the success of their mission.
2 Vietcong agents, disguised as a South Vietnamese major and his chauffeur, infiltrated the area around the hotel, spending a month carefully observing the routines and security measures.
Learning to blend in and mimic officer behavior to avoid raising suspicion.
They even managed to procure ARVN uniforms and a car,
Right.
further solidifying their disguise and allowing them to move more freely within the city and approach their target undetected.
And the car itself was a key part of the plan, because it wasn't just a mode of transportation, it was the delivery vehicle for a powerful bomb carefully concealed in the trunk.
And the timing of the detonation was no accident either.
Right.
They set the timer for 5:45 p.m., right during the peak of happy hour, when the rooftop bar would likely be crowded with off-duty officers.
It was a calculated move to maximize the impact of the explosion,
Yeah.
both in terms of physical damage and psychological effect.
And the resulting explosion was truly devastating. The ground floor of the hotel was completely obliterated by the blast.
Yeah.
And the force of the detonation was so strong that it ripped through the lower floors, leaving gaping holes and igniting gas canisters.
Debris was sent flying in all directions, damaging nearby structures and shattering windows blocks away, a testament to the raw power of the bomb they used.
Imagine the scene.
Right.
The festive atmosphere shattered in an instant by a deafening roar and a blinding flash, replaced by chaos, smoke, and the cries of the injured.
2 American officers lost their lives in the bombing. And while reports on the number of injured vary from 58 to as high as 98,
Right.
it's clear that the human cost was significant, with American military personnel, Vietnamese civilians,
Yeah.
and even an Australian serviceman caught in the blast.
And if the bomb had detonated even a little bit later, during an even busier time at the hotel,
Oh, wow.
the casualties could have been far, far worse. The sheer scale of the devastation really underscores the calculated nature of this attack, and it begs the question:
Yeah.
what exactly were the Viet Cong hoping to achieve with this bombing?
It seems like they had a multi-layered strategy at play,
Right.
aiming to accomplish several goals simultaneously with this audacious act.
Precisely. The bombing was not just about inflicting damage and causing casualties.
Right.
It was a carefully orchestrated move with both immediate and long-term objectives.
So let's unpack those objectives. What were the Viet Cong trying to communicate through this attack?
On one level, it was a demonstration of their strength and their reach,
Mm.
a powerful message directed at both the United States and the South Vietnamese government.
They wanted to show that they were a force to be reckoned with, capable of striking at the heart of American power, even in a heavily guarded city like Saigon.
Exactly. Remember, at this time, the U.S. was considering escalating the war with air raids on North Vietnam.
Right.
So this bombing served as a chilling warning, demonstrating the Viet Cong's ability to retaliate forcefully and strike deep within South Vietnam.
Essentially saying, if you escalate, we can escalate too.
Right.
And we can bring the fight right to your doorstep.
Precisely. And it wasn't just a message of military strength. It was also a psychological operation aimed at sowing doubt and fear among the South Vietnamese population.
By attacking a symbol of American presence,
Yeah.
they were trying to undermine the South Vietnamese people's trust in the U.S.'s ability to protect them.
Imagine you're a South Vietnamese citizen living in Saigon.
Hmm.
You see this hotel, this place where American officers gather, suddenly reduced to rubble by a Viet Cong bomb.
Right.
And you start to question whether the U.S. can really guarantee your safety.
It's a powerful tactic, using fear and uncertainty to erode public support for the South Vietnamese government and their alliance with the U.S.
And this attack threw the South Vietnamese government into further turmoil,
Yeah.
exacerbating the existing tensions between the U.S. Ambassador Maxwell Taylor and the ruling junta.
There was even suspicion, though unfounded, that some South Vietnamese officers might have been complicit in the attack,
Right.
which further fueled the atmosphere of distrust and paranoia.
The U.S. response in the immediate aftermath of the bombing was a mix of heightened security measures and a scramble to figure out how to respond to this brazen act of aggression.
They increased patrols, conducted more searches, and tightened security around key installations,
Yeah.
trying to regain a sense of control and project an image of strength.
But the bigger question looming over everything was, how would the U.S. retaliate for this attack?
Right.
Would they respond with military force, or would they choose a different path?
This was a pivotal moment for President Lyndon B. Johnson, a moment where he had to weigh the risks and benefits of various options, each with potentially far-reaching consequences.
His military advisors were urging swift and decisive action,
Right.
recommending immediate retaliatory bombing of North Vietnam to demonstrate American resolve and deter further attacks.
But Johnson was hesitant, grappling with a complex set of considerations,
Yeah.
including public opinion, the potential for escalation,
Yeah.
and the risk of widening the conflict.
Remember, this was Christmas Day, and a bombing raid on such a holy day could easily be seen as an act of aggression, alienating international support and turning public sentiment against the war.
And Johnson was also keenly aware of the potential for a wider war,
Right.
a conflict that could draw in other major powers like the Soviet Union or China,
Yeah.
turning a regional conflict into a global catastrophe.
So he was walking a tightrope, trying to balance the need to project strength and deter further aggression with the desire to avoid escalating the conflict and potentially sparking a wider war.
And in the end, after much deliberation, Johnson decided against immediate retaliation,
Right.
opting instead for a more cautious approach.
He justified his decision by saying that the U.S. should avoid appearing like it was trying to shoot its way out of a South Vietnamese political crisis, emphasizing the need for diplomacy and political solutions.
This decision revealed a fundamental tension between Johnson and his military advisors, a tension that would continue to grow as the war progressed.
It highlighted Johnson's deep-seated fear of a wider war and his willingness to prioritize restraint over immediate military action, even in the face of a direct attack on American personnel.
But this decision also had significant and lasting consequences, shaping the trajectory of the war and influencing perceptions on both sides of the conflict. So while Johnson's decision not to retaliate might have been driven by a desire to avoid escalation, it also had unintended consequences, didn't it?
It certainly did. The lack of a strong military response to the Brinks Hotel bombing
Yeah.
emboldened the North Vietnamese and the Vietcong,
Mhm.
reinforcing their belief that the U.S. was ultimately unwilling to commit fully to the fight in Vietnam.
They saw it as a sign of weakness,
Right.
a hesitation that could be exploited, and it fueled their determination to continue the war effort.
And for American policymakers, the bombing was a stark wake-up call, exposing the vulnerabilities of their current approach
Yeah.
and forcing them to confront some difficult questions about the future of U.S. involvement in Vietnam.
It shattered the illusion that the conflict could be contained or resolved quickly, that it was simply a matter of providing support and training to the South Vietnamese army.
The impact on the Brinks Hotel made it clear that the Vietcong posed a serious threat, capable of striking at the heart of American presence.
Right.
And it shifted the debate within the Johnson administration towards a more aggressive approach.
Those who had been advocating for the deployment of combat troops for a more direct and forceful intervention
Yeah.
now had a powerful argument to support their position.
And while Johnson continued to resist those calls for a time, the pressure was mounting, both from within his own administration and from the American public,
Yeah.
who were increasingly concerned about the escalating conflict and the growing number of American casualties.
And then came the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August of 1964, just a few months after the Brinks Hotel bombing,
Right.
which provided the Johnson administration with the justification they needed to escalate the war dramatically.
The Gulf of Tonkin incident, where North Vietnamese patrol boats allegedly attacked U.S. destroyers,
Yeah.
though the details remain contested. Right.
Gave Johnson the political capital to push for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution,
Okay.
which authorized him to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against U.S. forces.
And this paved the way for a massive increase in U.S. military involvement in Vietnam, with hundreds of thousands of combat troops deployed in the years that followed.
It's impossible to say with certainty whether the U.S. would have escalated the war to the same extent without the Brinks Hotel bombing, but it's clear that the attack played a significant role in shifting the momentum toward a more aggressive approach.
It heightened anxieties, exposed vulnerabilities, and fueled the arguments of those who favored a more forceful intervention.
And beyond the strategic and political implications, the Brinks Hotel bombing also had a profound impact on the South Vietnamese people who were caught in the crossfire of this escalating conflict.
Imagine the fear and uncertainty they must have felt, witnessing this brazen attack on a symbol of American power,
Right.
a place frequented by the very people who were supposed to be protecting them. It would have undoubtedly eroded their faith in the U.S.'s ability to guarantee their safety,
Right.
and perhaps even shaken their trust in their own government's capacity to maintain order and stability.
This erosion of trust was precisely what the Vietcongs were aiming for.
Yeah.
They understood that psychological warfare was just as important as military victories in this kind of conflict.
Absolutely.
By spreading fear and sowing doubt, they hoped to weaken the resolve of the South Vietnamese population
Right.
and create a climate of instability that would make it harder for the U.S. to achieve its objectives.
And they were, to some extent, successful in that regard.
Mhm.
The bombing contributed to a growing sense of unease and insecurity in South Vietnam,
Yeah.
making it even more difficult for the U.S. to build support for the war effort and achieve its goals of containing communism.
So the Brinks Hotel bombing wasn't just a tragedy in its own right.
Right.
It was a catalyst, a turning point that reverberated throughout the Vietnam War and beyond.
It exposed vulnerabilities, heightened tensions, and pushed both sides further down a path of escalation and violence.
It's a reminder of the complex and often unpredictable nature of war,
Yeah.
where actions have unintended consequences and where events can spiral out of control, leading to outcomes that no one could have foreseen.
And as we reflect on this event, on this Christmas Eve, it's crucial to remember the human cost of this conflict.
Right.
The lives lost, the families shattered, and the scars that remain long after the fighting has ended.
The Brinks Hotel bombing serves as a stark reminder of the importance of peace, understanding, and diplomacy in resolving conflicts,
Absolutely.
of seeking solutions that prioritize human life and well-being over political ideology or military might.
It challenges us to learn from the mistakes of the past,
Yeah.
to recognize the dangers of escalation, and to work towards building a world where such tragedies are never repeated.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Brinks Hotel bombing, a story that reminds us of the complexities of history and the enduring importance of seeking a more peaceful and just world.
We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking, and we wish you all a safe and peaceful holiday season.